A lot of the things that I'm going to say, a lot of you, I'm willing to bet a lot of you are not going to like, and a lot of you are going to say, that's nonsense, don't agree with it. And to that I say,
you can't handle the truth.
What's going on, guys? So welcome to part 1 on this series of the philosophy of truth. Today we're going to be talking about the problem of truth and why getting to the truth is not as simple as one might think. Now, having said that, a lot of the things that I'm going to say, a lot of you, I'm willing to bet a lot of you are not going to like, and a lot of you are going to say, that's nonsense, don't agree with it. And to that I say,
you can't handle the truth.
I see it in my head. I see the video. God. I see it in my head. I can't see it.
I'm not sure what to do with my hands.
But I see the video playing in my head. So that was funny. Okay, moving on. So diving right on in, the first reason why the truth can be complicated is because it is very closely tied to our perception of what is true, what we perceive to be true, and our perception of reality. And here's a part that a lot of people aren't going to like, but like I said before,
you can't handle the truth.
And the truth hurts, and any other cliche about truth that you can think of. Because truth is so closely tied to our subjective perspective of reality and what we perceive to be true, in order to really get to the actual truth of the way that the world actually is, you actually have to leave behind your perspective of what you think is true. You have to step outside of yourself and look at things objectively. You have to completely get rid of your perspective, your lenses of how you're viewing and seeing the world. Specifically, how you're viewing and seeing the things that you define to be true. But there's also a problem with that, because if you get rid of that in your perspective of things, then what else is left? And where do we start? Do we have a starting point? Or say that we actually find a definition of what we believe to be true, or how we go about seeing that things in this world are true, how we go about our perspective to arrive at the truth. Say we found a way to do that, but say we haven't left behind our perceptions or assertions as we got to that point of this is the definition of how you arrive at what's true and what's true. Then who's to say that those things didn't influence how we came up with that definition of truth and what's true in the first place? So here we have many issues, as you can already tell. And also we have to distinguish how we define true and what we mean by true, because there's a lot of different ways to use the word true. For instance, you can say the sun sets in the west. So you would say that that statement is true in contrast to false. You wouldn't say that that statement is fake, as in contrast to real, or you wouldn't say that that statement is sincere in contrast to insincere, like you would a friend, like they're a fake, God, here we go. Like saying that they are a fake, there we go, a fake friend, instead of, saying, oh, they're a true friend and a fake friend, or they're a sincere friend, as insincere, they're a real friend. All of that could be wrapped up into true, but is that what the word true actually means, even though that's how we use it sometimes? So what do we mean, or what do I mean, when we say, or I say, that the sun sets in the west? What about that statement is true? Is it simply an opinion, a assertion, or a fact? So this statement can be said to have its own value of truth, which is what philosophers would call truth value. So to ask for the truth value in a statement or sentence or whatever it would be, to ask for a truth value in that, you would basically be asking if the sentence is true or false. There can only be two truth values to anything. It's either positive or negative. It's either true or false. And philosophers view truth value not as something that's opinionated, not as what's your truth value for this statement. That's not a thing. Philosophers look at truth value. I messed up that word philosophers. I felt it. Philosophers view truth value as something more along mathematical lines, just like x in the equation, x plus 2 equals 5, x would be 3. 3 would be the truth value in that equation, if that makes sense. So another way to put it is asking for the truth value of the statement, the sun sets in the west. You would basically be asking, is that statement true or false, objectively speaking? So obviously, like I just said, the truth value of the statement, the sun sets in the west, is true. That's the truth value of that statement. Now, for this statement, it's pretty cut dry. It's pretty, like, obviously the sun sets in the west, but it's not always that cut and dry, because there are statements that people make, like the God of the Bible exists. Now we're getting into sticky territory. Sticky territory? I don't know if I want to say that. Whatever. So here is a list of different ways that we can propose truth values. We can do that through statements, through sentences, through propositions, through theories, through facts, assertions, utterances, beliefs, opinions, doctrines, and the list goes on and on. Now, there are a lot of issues with a lot of these different candidates. Reasons being, some of them are subjective, like beliefs and opinions, and others are more objective. But something that philosophers have agreed upon for the most part is that the best way of saying a truth value, of presenting a truth value, is through propositions. So there is a difference between sentences and propositions, and I'm going to explain what that is in case you don't already know, because maybe this is common sense and maybe I'm just help. But the difference between sentences and propositions is a sentence is a structure. Wow. God, I hate myself. I don't, but. So a sentence is what represents a linguistic language through symbols, and it can be a number of different things. It's this structure of symbols that represent something of linguistics. And it's symbols that relate to us. It's symbols that we can understand. So I could write this sentence, I love going to the movies, which I do. I have the time of my life going by myself. It's actually, I love it. It's great. So I could write that sentence, I love going to the movies, in English, German, Russian, Spanish, Japanese, Chinese, Sanskrit, Hebrew, Greek, you name it. I could write that sentence in many, many different styles and different fonts and different font sizes and different font colors, and they would all be different sentences because they are represented by different symbols of linguistics. But the meaning of the sentence is that you love going to the movies, or I love going to the movies, whether that's in Japanese or English, and it's written in Japanese in like weird Japanese fonts. Do Japanese people have weird, crazy fonts? I don't know. That's a great question. Anyway, or you could write that in English and use all the crazy fonts in the world that you want on your computer. So they would be structured differently, but the proposition is the same for all of them, no matter what language. It's that I love going to the movies. That's the proposition. The sentence can be written in many different ways, but the proposition is the actual meaning of the sentence. It's the essence of what the sentence is representing. So basically, sentences are representations of propositions. So even though propositions are the best bet, there's still a lot of difficulty in it because it's still kind of a ambiguous thing. It's not concrete. Basically saying propositions can still be misinterpreted. So if something is proposed, if a proposition is given to present what's the truth value of it, it could be a proposition that's an opinion or someone's belief. There could be subjectivity attached to it. You can say that this proposition is true and say that, this truth value is true, but, underlining that the proposition is very subjective and it's a belief. It's pretty much everything I just said. I'm just wording it differently. So in case you didn't understand it the first time I said it, hopefully you understood it the second time. So all that to say, if that didn't present enough problems as is, the real problem with truth is the liar's paradox. And if you caught it, good for you. You know, I have a hard time making a thumbs up. It just hurts. Lyme disease, man. Far out, dude. Why'd I do that? I'm not a pansy. I just, the inflammation in my hands is ridiculous. I can hardly make a fist. So anyway, but like I was saying, if you caught it, awesome. If not, all good. But in the thumbnail that I used for this video, there was a liar's paradox. I said everything I say in this video is a lie. So looking more into this is gonna hurt your brain and it's gonna make you question a lot of different things, but it's gonna be a good time, I promise. For some of you, it will. So the liar's paradox can really be wrapped up into one simple sentence. I am lying. Or this sentence is false. So you can look at this two different ways, right? You can look at it, which is how the classic people that look at the liar's paradox will look at it, where you're looking at the actual sentence itself, where this sentence is false. That sentence is true if it is false, but if it is false, then it can't be true. So how is it true when it's false? But if it's false, it is true. It's just the same type of thing for I am lying. So you can look at it that way, or you can look at it another way, which is the way that my brain went when I first started studying the liar's paradox, is that you can look at the sentence itself, but you can also look at the character of the person who's saying it. So if the person saying it says, you know, the liar's paradox, I am lying, well, you could look at them and say, well, thanks for being humble enough to say that you are lying. But also, if they're lying, so they're telling the truth, which means the sentence itself is a lie, but what's to say that they're not a compulsive liar, that they are lying when they're saying, I am lying? So they're telling the truth, but they're a liar. So if they're a liar, then they can't be telling the truth. So how do we judge their character based on them telling a truth that they're telling a lie? If you followed that, awesome, but I mean, my brain hurts, so so maybe you're saying, well, the sentence can be both true and false, but not exactly. So there are three laws of logic that play into this. Well, really, two of those laws really play into this, and then there's the third. And those laws are, number one, the law of non-contradiction, which says that something can't be both true and false at the same time. Number two is the law of excluded middle, which says that the truth can only have one truth value. And those are two of the three laws of logic. The two are those first two laws are like the main ones that apply to truth, but then there's the third law, which is the law of identity, or the principle of identity, which says that everything is itself and nothing else. Is if a statement is considered true, then that statement is true and it can't be anything else. So the liar's paradox contradicts those, which is why it's a paradox and which is why it's a problem. And a lot of people, I guarantee you, a lot of people watching this are like, this is completely meaningless, like this doesn't make any sense, which some people take that approach, but there are still issues that need to be addressed, and I'll explain why. So this is an issue because there are true sentences that have the same conclusion as the liar's paradox, but they're not a paradox. And an example of one of those sentences would be, this sentence is not written in Hebrew. That sentence is true because it is false, but it's not a paradox. So the question is, from the questions that we face today, from the things that we have proposed in life to be true, are those liar paradoxes, or are they true because they're false? And it's an interesting thought. It's an interesting thing to think about. But here's a list of different liar's paradoxes that we may have found ourselves saying in the past. I am a compulsive liar. Nobody goes to that restaurant. It's too crowded. Don't go near the water until you learn how to swim. If I know one thing, it's that I know nothing. This is the beginning of the end. Deep down, you're really shallow. What a pity that youth must be wasted on the young. If you say that every day, I mean, good for you. You're a poet. I can't resist anything but temptation. Death, thou shalt die. If you talk like that in your everyday life, again, good for you. And then Shakespeare says, I must be cruel to be kind. Well done, Shakespeare. So these can sound like oxymorons, but oxymorons and paradoxes, liar's paradoxes, are different. A paradox is a statement that contradicts what we know while delivering actual truth. And an oxymoron is a combination of two different words that contradict each other, and it's a dramatic form of speech. And some philosophers argue, and me as a layman philosopher, I have to agree with it, is that the liar's paradox shows how logic can be used against itself, where logic and reason fall short. Out of logic and through the use of excessive logic and reason, that we can actually create more chaos than understanding. So there are a number of philosophers who have tried to solve the liar's paradox through more logic and reason, and a lot of them fall apart because a lot of philosophers have addressed the original liar's paradox, which is this sentence is false or I am lying, but they don't talk about the other forms of the liar's paradox. One of those forms that's not just a sentence is you could have a sentence up top that says the following sentence is true, and then a sentence underneath that that says the following sentence is true. Another one underneath that, the following sentence is true. And then another one underneath that that says the first sentence in this set of sentences is false. And so I think that happens a lot with a lot of different arguments that we have when we try to use reason and logic, is we have all these things that, okay, this makes cohesive sense, this adds up, and then we have one fact that we like, I don't know what to do with. And so does that fact, is it not a liar's paradox? Is it just true because it's false? Or in that instance, it is a liar's paradox because that means, well, the whole thing is just false. All of those sentences are false if the first one's false. So philosophers have tried to solve the liar's paradox, but then they neglect other paradoxes like these, and it just once again shows how logic and reason can be used against itself. So this is obviously a problem with truth, because how many times have we said and used these liar's paradoxes when we've proposed something and we don't even realize it, but it just ends up being this paradox and creates chaos rather than understanding. And personally, I think that if a proposition creates more chaos than understanding, how true is it? And I do realize that the truth hurts. Like I said at the beginning of this video, some people have a hard time with it. And so, is that what's happening? Or is the truth something that when it is presented in a reasonable, logical way, objective truth, would it just be something that's hard to argue? Like, you can't argue with it. And so wouldn't it be, I know it would be harder to accept. A lot of people wouldn't even accept it. They would just be wrapped up in their own pride and not be humble enough to accept the actual truth. Or is it, in that instance, wouldn't truth just be something that's easy to grasp and understand? Or is it such a tug of war, just a war, and it's always going to be that hard to accept? Or is it a liar's paradox? And so these are the issues of truth that we have, and that we have to face, and that we have to figure out, how do we solve these problems of truth? And so there are a number of different theories, not so much on how to solve the liar's paradox, I'm not going to go over that, but there are a number of different theories on how to arrive at reasonable, logical truth that doesn't end up in a liar's paradox, and that is objective, that people can understand. And that is what we will be going over next time. So, like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you misfits there.
Peace.